Welcome to our channel where we cover the largest hacks from the previous month. For each of these hacks, we'll give you a detailed analysis and show you what happened behind the scenes. So if you're new here, please hit the subscribe button so you can catch these videos every single month. Let's start with an overview of what happened in August. Now in August, we've seen over $171 million lost due to Web3 security incidents. Now over 16 million was lost just due to smart contract hacks, and in fact, most of these funds were lost due to rug pulls and scams. Rug pulls and scams accounted for $153 million being lost in August, and $2.5 million was lost due to private key compromises. Now some of the hacks we'll be covering today include the Exactly hack, the Zunami hack, as well as the Cypher hack. If you're interested in any one of these particular hacks, check out the timestamps below and you can skip ahead to any one of those hacks. Now let's get started. The largest smart contract hack in August was on the Exactly protocol. Here we have a chart of Exactly's TVL, and you can see that there's a sharp drop around August 18th over here where the hack happened. Now Exactly is a lending protocol deployed on Optimism. It offers both variable and fixed interest rates based on pool utilization. Exactly supports leverage across single and multi-asset positions. Now Exactly has many different markets. Each market corresponds to a different asset. For example, the USDC market of Exactly is called XAUSDC, which is a smart contract. So if you wanted to lend or borrow USDC from Exactly, you would use the XAUSDC market. Now on August 18th, the protocol was hacked for 7.2 million, primarily due to a missing validation check. Now let's take a look at this expensive missing validation check. So this function over here called leverage is on the debt manager contract. It takes this parameter called market. Now, this function does not validate that the market parameter is actually a market which belongs to the Exactly protocol. As a result, the attacker can create their very own market and pass it into this function. As a result of this, the permit function or the permit modifier has a check which is bypassed. So the first parameter within this permit function is actually just that fake market that is provided by the attacker. It just so happens that the parameter is renamed to token over here. So on this token or fake market contract, the safe permit function is called. And even though a fake signature is provided to it over here, the function is going to pass. And that's because the attacker is the one who wrote the code for this fake market contract. And they wrote this function such that it will always pass even for fake signatures. And so as a result, this function passes and the code goes on to this part over here where the state variable message sender is set to the victim's account. It's important to realize over here that this safe permit function represents an implicit validation check. When used with a proper market, this function would fail if an invalid signature was provided over here. However, since a fake market was used, the safe permit function does not function as expected, and so the code continues executing. And at this point here, when message sender is set to the victim's account, the attacker has effectively impersonated the victim. It looks as if the victim has called the leverage function rather than the attacker. So let's see how the attacker used this to make a profit. The attacker started by deploying that fake market contract which we already talked about. Next, the attacker created a Uniswap v3 pool which consisted of USDC as well as that fake market token. Then the attacker called the leverage function on the debt manager contract, passing in that fake market address as well as an invalid permit message. Within this invalid permit message was the victim's account address. Now, because that safe permit function did not fail, message sender within the debt manager contract is set to the victim's address. So the attacker has effectively impersonated the victim. Next, the debt manager contract calls a function on the fake market contract. Remember that the attacker wrote all the code in the fake market contract, and so they also wrote the code in this function. So this function is now going to add some liquidity to that Uniswap v3 pool that was created in step 2. As a result, the attacker now has an LP token for this pool, which they will use later to redeem their profits. Now, the attacker still has control of the code in that fake market contract. So the next thing they do here is call the cross deleverage function on the debt manager. It's important to realize here that the debt manager contract is being re-entered because the leverage call over here actually hasn't completed execution. And remember that the leverage call is also on the debt manager contract. So at this point, because we have a reentrancy, message sender is still set to the victim's address on the debt manager contract. So what happens here is the debt manager contract now uses the Uniswap v3 pool created by the attacker to swap from USDC to the fake market tokens. But where does this USDC come from? Well, it comes from the victim. In fact, it comes by transferring the victim's XAUSDC tokens, converting them to USDC, and putting them in the Uniswap v3 pool through a swap. And effectively, the attacker has manipulated the protocol into transferring the victim's tokens into that Uniswap v3 pool, which the attacker can withdraw from any time since they have the liquidity tokens for that pool. So if that wasn't enough, the attacker proceeds to further exploit the victim by reducing their health factor. Now, the health factor of the victim was actually reduced already when their collateral was reduced due to the removal of the XAUSDC. However, this alone isn't enough to liquidate the victim. So the attacker takes a loan from XAUSDC, which results in the victim's health factor decreasing slightly just below the liquidatable threshold. The attacker can then liquidate the user's position to exploit them further. The attacker can then repeat this hack for a different user or a different market of Exactly instead of XAUSDC. So the Exactly team paused the protocol within 2 hours of the hack. However, the pause functionality of the protocol actually doesn't freeze every function in the protocol. For example, it's still possible to withdraw from the protocol when the contract is paused. So the attacker used the functions which were still executable to carry out a smaller hack, which happened 3 hours after the first one. A detailed postmortem was published by the team 2 weeks after the hack, and one of the takeaways for the team was to audit any code before it was exposed to users. Now, Exactly actually has had 4 audits in the past. It just so happens that the vulnerable code was not part of any of these 4 past audits. Developers should carefully validate all relevant input parameters into function. In this case, we had that market parameter which was not validated. So the attacker was able to pass in any market function market parameter that they want. Now, one thing that can help with determining what parameter validation to do is fuzz testing. Fuzz testing will use many different values to call the function to determine which values of the parameter result in undesirable conditions. And this can help give you a hint as to which values of the parameters need to be validated. Furthermore, developers should be wary of any mechanisms which can be used to impersonate users. So many contracts allow other users to submit transactions on behalf of another user. And so with these mechanisms, there should be extra caution to make sure that they can't be used by an attacker to impersonate a victim. Let's move on to the next largest hack in August, which happened on the Zunami protocol. Zunami is a yield aggregating protocol deployed on Ethereum. The protocol deposits liquidity into various yield earning contracts, and one such contract actually provides rewards in SDT tokens. SDT stands for Stake Down Tokens. Now, Zunami features a stablecoin called UZD, and this is actually a rebasing stablecoin. So if you have a UZD balance and the protocol's revenue increases, your UZD balance will automatically increase. On August 13th, Zunami was hacked for 2.1 million due to a balance manipulation exploit. And the balance manipulation actually happened on that UZD stablecoin. So the UZD balance is actually calculated by multiplying the base balance of UZD, so that's the balance not accounting for the protocol revenue, and multiplying it by the total holdings of the protocol and dividing it by the total supply of UZD. So the total holdings of Zunami is simply the sum of the holdings of each strategy. One such strategy receives rewards in SDT. So the holdings of that strategy are calculated by multiplying the SDT price by the amount of SDT owned by this strategy. Now the SDT price is retrieved by calling the getAmountsOut function on the SushiSwap router. Now this function relies on the spot reserve balances of a DEX pool, and these can be easily manipulated. So the attacker manipulated these balances by making a massive swap on the pool, and as a result, this function returned a massively inflated value, thus inflating the SDT holdings, the total holdings, and thus the attacker's UZD balance. So let's look at each step of the hack. The attacker started by taking a flash loan of USDC and wrapped Ether. Next, the attacker accumulated a large balance of UZD by swapping that USDC for UZD. Then the attacker swapped a small amount of wrapped Ether to SDT tokens. The SDT they received was directly transferred to that SDT strategy contract. Now, why did they do this? It's because they needed to have a non-zero SDT amount here in order to exploit this inflated SDT price over here. And at the time of the hack, this number was in fact 0. So they had to donate a little bit to take advantage of the inflated price. Next, the attacker actually manipulated the price. They swapped most of their wrapped Ether to SDT. So this was a very large swap. And so the pool is now highly imbalanced in SushiSwap in favor of SDT. If you wanted to buy SDT from SushiSwap, you would be paying way more than you should. The attacker then calls the cash price function on the UZD token contract, which will effectively cash the price that was manipulated over here. Finally, the attacker has now they have completed the inflation of their UZD balance, so they can realize their profit simply by swapping their UZD to other assets and other stablecoins. Now, with Zunami, there were actually 2 exploit transactions, with 8 minutes between them. The first transaction was actually the smaller hack, and that transaction resulted in less funds lost. However, 8 minutes after the first transaction, there was a second hack which resulted in most of the funds being lost. Now, the exploit was reported on Twitter a few hours after the initial hack. And shortly after that first report, the team themselves officially confirmed the hack on Twitter. Currently, Zunami v2 is in development, and this time they are collaborating closely with auditors to make sure the protocol is secure. Now, recall that there are actually 2 hack transactions. And so if the protocol might have been paused after that first transaction, then it's possible that most of the funds may have been saved. And in order for this to have happened, there had to have been very effective monitoring, alerting, and response mechanisms in place. Also, spot reserves with indexes cannot be relied upon for prices. Instead, resilient oracles such as Chainlink should be used to get prices. This is because the reserve balances within a DEX pool can be very easily manipulated. Finally, an audit would very likely detect such vulnerabilities. This is because this is a very well-known and common vulnerability. Now, Balancer was also hacked in August. We won't be covering the exploit in too much detail because details surrounding this hack are still somewhat sensitive. However, we will at least tell you what happened during this hack. And hopefully in a later video, we'll cover this in detail. Balancer is a decentralized exchange on Ethereum. It supports many types of pools, including stable pools, linear pools, and boosted pools. Now, this hack relied on a vulnerability on boosted pools. Linear pools let you swap from an underlying token to its yield-bearing token. And so linear pools are an important feature of boosted pools themselves. So basically with these linear pools, they let you swap from the underlying token to the yield-bearing token. For example, with Aave's USDC market, you have the USDC as well as AUSDC, which is Aave's yield-bearing token. So the linear pool would let you swap between USDC and AUSDC. Now, every balancer pool has its own LP token, and this includes linear pools. So boosted pools actually allow you to swap between the LP tokens of different related linear pools. Now, the balancer team detected a vulnerability on boosted pools, and they announced this publicly on August 22nd. 5 days later, 2.1 million was stolen from the protocol through flash loan attacks. Now, Balancer, as we mentioned before, announced this vulnerability publicly on August 22nd. And as soon as they did this, there was sort of a race between the liquidity providers and the black hat hackers. Liquidity providers wanted to withdraw their funds before they were stolen, and the black hat hackers wanted to find the exact exploit to steal these funds before the LPs could withdraw their funds. Fortunately, the Balancer team did a great job of warning liquidity providers, and most of the liquidity was removed prior to the hack. However, some funds remained in these pools, and so these are the funds that were stolen on August 27th. And once again, we won't be going into detail about the root cause of the exploit due to the sensitive nature of this information at this time. However, we'll cover this in a later video. Next, we have the Cypher protocol. So Cypher is both a trading and a lending protocol built on the Solana blockchain. Cypher offers both spot and derivative trading markets, and as we mentioned, it's also a lending protocol, so it offers lending markets as well. Now, the interesting thing about Cypher is that it has a unique account model. It consists of two different types of accounts, master accounts and sub-accounts. So the master account is sort of the main account for the user, and it's associated with multiple sub-accounts. Each sub-account corresponds to a different position opened by the user. So a sub-account could be connected to the master account, or it could be isolated from the master account. A connected sub-account's health is determined by the combined health of all sub-accounts connected to the corresponding master account. So let's say you have a sub-account which has too much debt and not enough collateral. Well, its health factor might still be okay because there may be another sub-account connected to it which has excessive collateral which compensates for the other sub-account. However, an isolated sub-account's health is determined only by itself. It can't be saved by another sub-account. Now, due to a combination of two separate bugs, one of which was related to isolated sub-accounts, the protocol was hacked for 1 million on August 7th, 2023. The first bug in question was related to the process of converting the sub-account from being a connected account to being an isolated account. So when that process happens, this handler over here is called. Now, the margining type of the sub-account is correctly updated to the isolated type. However, let's have a look at this Cypher account struct over here, which represents the master account. You can see that it has the sub-accounts property over here, which represents the sub-accounts which are associated to this master account. However, you can see that this sub-account cache over here is not updated anywhere in this handler. Ideally, this sub-account cache should have been updated to remove that sub-account. But since it wasn't removed, the master account and the sub-account remain connected despite setting the sub-account to isolated status. Now, the second bug, and perhaps the more serious one, was related to the health check. Now, when you borrow funds from Cypher, there has to be a health check to ensure that you have enough collateral to support your debt. Now, there is one special condition over here, whereby if your position was already underwater before you're borrowing the funds, a different condition is checked. So basically it checks here, if your position is healthier after the borrow than before the borrow, then it lets the borrow go through. However, this health factor over here, for before the borrow and after the borrow, were both calculated as 0. And the primary reason for this was due to some oracles that were incorporated into Cypher. These oracles were not initialized or configured properly, and as a result, these health factors were calculated to be 0. And since 0 is greater than or equal to 0, this check now passed. And the attacker was able to borrow funds which they should not have been able to borrow. So the attacker created their master account 40 minutes before the hack, and they executed a small version of the hack, causing barely any losses at all initially. So this was probably a small test by the hacker. The attacker then repeated the attack with larger balances to drain more funds. And the contract was frozen 4 hours after the hack, and the team and the Cypher team notified the community. The team plans to compensate users by way of a pro rata redemption package. So this will offer compensation based on or relative to the size of their position in the protocol. The team will also mint debt tokens to the users, so this will be corresponding to their losses, and the users will later on be able to redeem these debt tokens. So a good test suite could have helped to detect this hack, or the vulnerabilities leading to this hack rather. The first vulnerability with the master account could have been detected through a good assertion. So in the test for testing the isolation of a sub-account, if an assertion was placed on the master account to ensure that the sub-account cache no longer contains the sub-account, the bug would have been detected. Also, with the Oracle problem, in this case, if there was a test to ensure some correct sanity validation checks to ensure that, for example, if the Oracle is returning a value of 0, then the function should fail, then this type of test would have detected the vulnerability as well. And again, this hack involved multiple transactions. So monitoring and alerting can be used to freeze the contract in order to mitigate losses if you can freeze it before the last hack transaction occurs. And the faster the contract is frozen, the more funds can be saved. Finally, audits would likely detect such vulnerabilities, as these types of vulnerabilities are manual review is pretty effective at catching these types of vulnerabilities. Let's move on to Leetswap, which is a DEX on multiple chains, but in particular the Base chain. And at the time of the hack, they were Base's largest DEX. Leetswap is also a Uniswap v2 fork. Now on August 1st, Leetswap was hacked for over 600K, primarily due to an access control issue. Now the problematic function is this one over here called transfer fees supporting tax tokens. So this function starts with an underscore, as you can see here. And this is a hint that this function was meant to be internal. However, you can see that it's been marked with public visibility over here. And so as a result, anyone can call this function externally. And this function actually allows the transferring of any token from the pool to the fee wallet. And as a result, the attacker can very easily manipulate the reserves within the pool by transferring these reserves to the fee wallet. And that's exactly what the attacker did. So the main step of the hack was that the attacker called this problematic function over here to transfer one of the two tokens in the pair to the fee wallet. So as a result, the balance of one of the tokens in the pair was very low, and then the other token's balance was normal. They then called the sync function to update the reserve numbers. So now we have one reserve number which is normal, and then the other reserve number which is very low. As a result, the attacker could swap a very small amount of one token for a very large amount of the other token. And in this way, the attacker was able to drain the liquidity from the DEX pool. So the attack was acknowledged shortly after it happened, and the team offered a 50 ETH reward to the attacker to return the rest of the funds. However, the attacker did not respond. There were many other pools that were at risk. However, thanks to the efforts of white hat hackers, these funds were drained and then custodied for the team to later claim back. And preventing this type of hack all comes down to ensuring proper access controls. This time, the problem was that the visibility of the function was probably meant to be internal, whereas it was marked as public. And so it's important to double check the visibility of each function, and tests can help with this as well. Finally, an audit would almost certainly detect this type of vulnerability. Let's move on to rug pulls and scams in August. Rug pulls and scams actually accounted for most of the losses in August. So the largest scam by far was the Solar Techno Alliance. This is actually a $120 million crypto-based Ponzi scheme, which involved the STA token. STA stands for Solar Techno Alliance. Now, fortunately, the Indian authorities arrested the mastermind behind this Ponzi scheme. However, it's not clear as yet how many of these funds are recoverable. Next, we have the Ball token, which pulled the rug on the base chain, resulting in a loss of $23 million. This was primarily due to market manipulation. So the attackers strategically inflated the price of the token through liquidity addition and large trades at the right times. And when they were satisfied with the price of the token, they simply withdrew liquidity to pull the rug. Next, we have Magnate Finance on the base chain, which saw a loss of $6.4 million due to a rug pull. Magnate Finance is a fake lending protocol on the base chain, and the attacker used some privilege functions to set the asset prices of the borrow assets manually, and they were thus able to steal these assets easily. ZachXBT tweeted a warning one day before the rug pull. And ZachXBT was able to trace the deployer of Magnate Finance. He was able to find a link between this deployer and a different security incident. However, not everyone was able to withdraw their funds in time, and so at least $6.4 million worth of assets were lost. Next, we have an NFT collector who lost a lot of funds due to a signature phishing scheme. So one problem here was that a signature phishing scam resulted in the bidding of a ghost NFT on Blur for 333 ETH, and various other token signatures were used to transfer ERC20 tokens from the victim's wallet. Next, we have the fake Layer 0 token scam. This made use of a fake Layer 0 Twitter account, which posted malicious website links on Twitter, claiming that an airdrop was available. So naive users went to these websites to claim the airdrops, and when they interacted with the website with their wallets, they simply lost their funds. Next, we have the Apache NFT sales room. This time, the attacker just had lots of ASN tokens, which they swapped to drain the liquidity of the DEX pool. Next, we have SwirlLend on the base chain. It's another fake lending protocol on the base chain that basically stole its users' funds. Here's a few private key compromises which happened in August. First, we have Steadify. In this case, ownership was transferred to the attacker's address, and the attacker used their newfound privileges with this owner role to steal the funds. Then we have RocketSwap, which was a very similar key compromise, whereby the privileged keys were stolen due to a server brute force attack. Then we have BitBrowser, whereby the server was also compromised. In particular, the server data cache was compromised, and from this data cache, the attacker was able to retrieve user wallet keys and steal funds from those user wallets. Here are some of the smaller exploits we've seen in August. First up, we have Earning Farm on Ethereum, which was victim to a classic reentrancy exploit whereby the withdrawal function was re-entered before updating the balances. Then we have SVT, which fell victim to a price manipulation hack. The price depended on balances which could be easily manipulated. So the attacker manipulated the price and then bought and sold at incorrect prices to make a profit. Next, we have the UWork token on Binance Smart Chain. It was coded such that when you're sending a token to the DEX, an extra 1% is burned. So the attacker manipulated the DEX into transferring tokens to itself, thereby reducing its balance. And so they lowered the balance so much that they could eventually simply swap a small amount of tokens for the rest of the liquidity in the pool. Then we have Future Finance, which had a function to let you convert LP tokens from one pool to another. And the calculation of how many LP tokens you got back relied on the spot reserve balances of a DEX pool. And as we've seen before, these balances are very easily manipulatable. So the attacker received far more LP tokens than they should have and used that to drain the protocol. Curve also fell victim to a sandwich attack, which exploited the behavior of Curve's burner contract. Then we have a couple of other smaller hacks here with BTC20 and Harbor Protocol, which both relied on DEX spot reserve balances for calculating prices. Let's take a look at some of the trends we've seen in August. First up, we've definitely seen the base chain targeted. 20% of the largest contract hacks happened on the base chain. Also, 3 of the largest rug pulls happened on the base chain, and these 3 rug pulls alone resulted in losses of over 30 million. Also, an alleged private key compromise on Rocketswap resulted in a loss of 900k. This is a sign that hackers will prey on newly launched rollups, and so we're likely to see this in the future on other newly launched rollups. The Hypernative monitoring platform detected the attack contracts prior to 60% of the largest hacks. It also detected 60% of the largest hacks in real time. And finally, 60% of the largest hacks involved multiple transactions, also detected by Hypernative. And these 3 statistics just tell us that, that monitoring, alerting, and rapid response can have a huge impact by either preventing hacks entirely or significantly mitigating their damage through rapid response. Another trend we've noticed is that there's been greatly increased caution when revealing exploit data early. So a few months ago, whenever an exploit happened, every security researcher was rushing to post the explanation of the hack very quickly after it happened. However, due to some incidents that happened related to the Curve hack in July, everyone is much more cautious about revealing details that may allow other exploiters to repeat the hack. And so there's been a call for standards to decide when to reveal this information and how to reveal it safely. Price manipulation accounted for a lot of hacks this month. In fact, at least 40% of the largest hacks were caused by price manipulation, and over 5 hacks were caused due to reliance on the spot reserve balances of DEX, which can be easily manipulated. Here are some other trends and outliers we've seen in August. Now, at least 60% of the largest hacks had some commonalities. Most importantly, 60% of the largest hacks were either completely unaudited or had the vulnerable component of the code unaudited. So this just tells us that protocols that are unaudited are much more likely to get hacked. Also, 60% of the protocols were involved trading protocols of some sort, were lending protocols of some sort, or these protocols were on L2s. Finally, it was the second consecutive month whereby the largest exploit involved reentrancy. So in July, the largest exploit was the Curve exploit, which happened due to a Viper compiler error causing reentrancy. This time, the largest smart contract hack was on the Exactly protocol, and while reentrancy wasn't the root cause, it definitely played a part in the exploit. And also, this is the first time this year that a Solana contract hack made it into the monthly top 4. So this brings us to the end of August. Thanks so much for joining us, and we hope you'll join us for the September Hacks Roundup next month as well. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so, and also follow our Twitter account for more great security content.